Thanksgiving was always a special occasion in our family, a time for gathering, for laughter, and for sharing stories. But one Thanksgiving, what was meant to be a joyful celebration turned into a haunting memory that would linger with me forever. I'm Emma, and this is the story of how our beloved dog Baxter vanished on Thanksgiving, leaving behind a trail of mystery and fear. The day started like any other Thanksgiving. The house was filled with the aroma of roasting turkey and pumpkin pie, a feast laid out on the dining table, waiting for the family to gather around. Baxter, our loyal golden retriever, was always a part of our celebrations, his tail wagging, eyes bright with excitement. As the evening progressed, our small dining room became lively with chatter and the clinking of glasses. Baxter, as usual, was under the table, hoping for scraps, his presence a comforting constant in the festive atmosphere. It was when we were about to serve dessert that I noticed Baxter wasn't begging for his usual share of turkey. I called his name, expecting him to bound in from wherever he was snoozing, but there was no response. A sense of unease crept over me. "Baxter?" I called again, louder this time, my voice slicing through the jovial banter. The family fell silent, realizing that our furry companion was indeed missing. We searched the house, calling his name, checking every room, but Baxter was nowhere to be found. The front door was ajar, a detail we had overlooked in our festive bustle. A cold wind blew in, carrying with it the realization that Baxter might have wandered outside. Panic set in. Baxter was more than just a pet, he was a part of our family. My parents, sister, and I quickly split up to search the neighborhood, our calls for Baxter echoing in the chilly November air. The streets were deserted, the neighbors already settled in their homes for their Thanksgiving celebrations. The only response to our calls was the rustling of the autumn leaves and the distant howl of the wind. Hours passed with no sign of Baxter. My feet ached from walking, and my voice was hoarse from calling his name. The festive spirit had been replaced by a heavy cloak of worry. Baxter had never wandered off before. His disappearance was completely out of character. As we regrouped at home, the possibility that something terrible might have happened to Baxter hung over us like a dark cloud. We decided to continue the search in the morning, hoping for daylight to bring better luck. That night, I lay in bed, restless, the silence of the house punctuated by the occasional gust of wind. Baxter's absence was a gaping hole, a missing piece in our family tapestry. The next morning, we resumed our search, extending our radius further into the woods that bordered our neighborhood. The woods were dense and unwelcoming, the bare branches casting twisted shadows on the ground. It was here, deep in the woods, that I found the first clue, Baxter's collar, hanging on a low branch, as if placed there deliberately. A shiver ran down my spine. The collar was intact, the clasp still closed. How had it ended up here, away from any path Baxter might have taken? I called out to my family, showing them the unsettling find. We searched the area, our hopes dwindling with each passing minute. The woods seemed to close in around us, an oppressive presence that watched our every move. As we delved deeper, the air grew colder, and a fog began to roll in, enveloping the woods in a ghostly shroud. That's when we heard it, a faint whimpering, a sound that set our hearts racing. We followed the sound, pushing through the underbrush, until we came upon a clearing. And there, in the center, was Baxter, lying motionless on the ground. We rushed to him, relief flooding through me, until I saw the state he was in. Baxter was alive, but barely conscious, his eyes glazed, his body covered in scratches. It was as if he had been running, terrified, from something. We carried him home, the questions swirling in my mind. What had happened in those woods? What had driven our gentle Baxter to such a state of fear? The vet confirmed that Baxter had no serious injuries, just exhaustion and minor cuts. But he couldn't explain the dog's traumatized behavior. Baxter refused to leave the house after that, his once playful demeanor replaced by a constant state of anxiety. The woods where we found him became a place of dread for me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister lurked within, something that had terrorized our beloved dog. Rumors among the neighbors spoke of shadows moving in the woods, of strange noises at night. Some even whispered of an old legend, a tale of a spirit that roamed the forest, a malevolent force that preyed on the unsuspecting. I couldn't bring myself to venture into those woods again, the fear of the unknown, of what had haunted Baxter, too great to overcome. The festive spirit of Thanksgiving was forever marred by the memory of that night, the joy replaced by a haunting question: what evil had we narrowly escaped in the depths of those woods? Baxter eventually recovered, but he was never the same. He would often stare into the distance, growling at something only he could see. And every Thanksgiving, as we gathered around the table, there was an unspoken understanding, a shared memory of the horror that had touched our lives. The mystery of what happened to Baxter in those woods remained unsolved, a chilling enigma that haunted my dreams. But one thing was certain: whatever resided in the heart of those woods was a darkness that we had been fortunate to escape, a malevolent presence that lingered just beyond the reach of the light. Every Thanksgiving, my friends and I had a tradition. We'd gather at my buddy Mark's family cabin, deep in the woods of northern Maine, for a weekend of good food, laughter, and reminiscing. This year, the group consisted of me, Mark, our friend Lily, and her boyfriend, Tyler. We set off on Thanksgiving Eve, our spirits high despite the chilly November air and the long drive ahead. The roads were quiet, the usual bustle of the holiday season not yet in full swing. I was behind the wheel, the others chattering excitedly about the weekend plans. As we drove through a particularly isolated stretch of road, surrounded by dense forest, a figure emerged from the shadows, thumb outstretched, a hitchhiker. He was a tall man, shrouded in a tattered overcoat, his face partially obscured by a hood. "Should we stop?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with concern. "No way," Tyler responded quickly. "You never know who they might be." We drove past a man, but as I glanced in the rearview mirror, I noticed he was now in the middle of the road, watching our car recede into the night. Minutes later, the unexpected happened. A loud bang, the car lurched violently, and we skidded off the road, crashing into a ditch. The car came to a jarring stop, the airbags deployed, and for a moment, there was only the sound of our heavy breathing. "Is everyone okay?" I asked, my heart racing. "We're fine, just shaken," Mark replied, checking on Lily and Tyler. We were lucky. Aside from a few bruises and the shock, we were unharmed. But our relief was short-lived. As we clambered out of the wrecked car, the sound of footsteps crunching on gravel filled the air. It was the hitchhiker, his face now visible in the moonlight, a mask of rage and madness. He started running towards us, a manic gleam in his eyes. Panic set in. "Run!" I yelled, and we bolted into the woods, the hitchhiker in hot pursuit. The forest was dark and unwelcoming, the trees like silent sentinels watching our flight. We ran without direction, driven by primal fear, the hitchhiker's footsteps a relentless echo behind us. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent shivers down my spine. I could hear him muttering to himself, a string of incoherent curses and threats. "We need to find help," Mark gasped as we paused to catch our breath. "There's a town a few miles back." maybe we can make it. We changed course, heading in the direction of the town. The hitchhiker was still behind us, his presence a constant terror that spurred us on. Our flight seemed endless, the woods a labyrinth from which there was no escape. But finally, the lights of the town appeared, a beacon of hope in the darkness. We stumbled onto the main road, the hitchhiker still in pursuit. His determination was terrifying, his reasons for chasing us unknown but undoubtedly sinister. Exhausted and scared, we ran through the empty streets, our cries for help piercing the night. The town was eerily deserted, the Thanksgiving holiday leaving it a ghost town. Then, Salvation, the police station, its lights a promise of safety. We burst through the doors, collapsing in the lobby, our story tumbling out in a torrent of panic and relief. The officers sprang into action, securing the building and dispatching a unit to search for the hitchhiker. We sat in the station, the adrenaline slowly ebbing away, replaced by the trembling realization of how close we had come to disaster. The search for the hitchhiker yielded no results. He had vanished into the night, his motives and identity remaining a mystery. The police theorized he might have been responsible for the crash, a deliberate act of malice. The rest of the night passed in a blur. Our families were contacted, and we were checked over by paramedics. The physical injuries were minor, but the psychological scars would take longer to heal. Thanksgiving Day dawned, but the festive spirit was lost to us. We were just grateful to be alive, to be together. The cabin celebration was forgotten, replaced by a quiet day at home, reflecting on the fragility of life and the unexpected dangers that lurk in the shadows. The incident became a cautionary tale, a reminder to be wary of the strangers we pass on the road. As for the hitchhiker, he remained a phantom, a specter of the night that had chased us through the woods. Our Thanksgiving tradition was never the same after that. We still gathered, but the joy was tinged with the memory of that harrowing night. We held each other a little tighter, spoke a little softer, and never forgot the long road on Thanksgiving Eve, where our brush with death taught us the true meaning of gratitude. Thanksgiving had always been a solitary affair for me since my family lived miles away. This year, to shake off the holiday blues, I decided to catch a late-night movie at the Old Regal Theater in downtown. I'd heard they were screening classic horror films for the occasion, a peculiar choice for Thanksgiving, but it appealed to my love for the genre. As I approached the theater, a chill ran down my spine. The Regal was an ancient building, its Art Deco facade faded by time. It stood like a relic, a stark contrast to the modern buildings surrounding it. The marquee flickered dimly, announcing a midnight showing of an old film called The Shadow's Grasp. The lobby was deserted, save for an elderly ticket seller who seemed as ancient as the theater itself. His eyes, obscured by thick glasses, briefly met mine as I purchased my ticket. "Enjoy the show," he rasped, a crooked smile crossing his weathered face. The theater was eerily silent as I entered, the dim lighting casting long, ominous shadows. I chose a seat in the middle row, the best spot for both picture and sound. As the lights dimmed and the screen came to life, a sense of unease settled over me. I was utterly alone in the theater. The Shadow's Grasp was a black and white film, its quality grainy and the audio filled with static. It was a tale of a small town haunted by a mysterious entity that lurked in the shadows, preying on the unsuspecting. The more I watched, the more I felt an odd sense of déjà vu, as if I'd seen the film before. Halfway through, a particularly intense scene made me reach for my drink, but as my hand groped in the dark, it brushed against something, or someone. Startled, I turned to find a figure seated beside me, cloaked in darkness. How did you get in here?" I stammered, my heart racing. The figure remained silent, its face obscured. Panic surged within me. I hadn't heard anyone enter, hadn't seen anyone when I sat down. I rose to leave, but as I did, the figure grabbed my arm, its grip icy cold. "Watch," it whispered, a voice like the rustling of dry leaves. I wrenched free, bolting for the exit. But as I reached the doors, they wouldn't budge, as if sealed shut. A scream caught in my throat as I realized I was trapped. The film continued to play, its scenes growing increasingly disturbing. The entity in the movie, a shapeless, dark mass, seemed to move beyond the screen, its presence filling the theater. I turned to confront the figure beside me, demanding answers, but it was gone. In its place was a shadow that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The air grew colder, a palpable dread hanging over me. I retreated to my seat, my eyes fixed on the screen, watching as the entity in the film devoured its victims, absorbing them into the darkness. The line between film and reality blurred, the shadows in the theater undulating in rhythm with the scenes. Then, the screen flickered, displaying a scene that made my blood run cold, the theater itself, empty except for one viewer, me. On the screen, I watched myself, watched as the shadow beside me grew, its form enveloping the figure on the screen. I was in the movie, a part of this twisted narrative. The realization hit me like a physical blow. The film wasn't just a film, it was a trap, a feeding ground for whatever resided in the shadows. In a desperate bid for escape, I hurled my drink at the projector booth. The glass shattered, and the liquid sizzled as it met the hot projector, the screen going dark. The theater plunged into darkness, the only sound my ragged breathing. I stumbled forward, guided by the faint glow of the exit sign. As I reached the lobby, the doors finally gave way, and I spilled out into the street, the cold air a harsh contrast to the stifling atmosphere inside. I looked back at the Regal Theater, its marquee now dark, the building more tomb-like than ever. I ran, not stopping until I reached the safety of my apartment, the events at the theater replaying in my mind. The next day, driven by a need for answers, I returned to the theater. But where it once stood was an empty lot, overgrown with weeds. The Regal Theater, it seemed, had never existed, not in this time, not in this place. I scoured the town archives, but there was no record of the theater, no mention of the shadow's grasp. It was as if the night's horrors had been a figment of my imagination, a nightmare born from loneliness and the eerie atmosphere of Thanksgiving night. But I knew the truth. The Regal Theater was real, as was the terror I had experienced. It was a place unbound by time, a hunting ground for something ancient and malevolent, lurking in the shadows, waiting for its next unsuspecting viewer. I never went to the movies alone again, especially not on Thanksgiving. The memory of that night lingered, a reminder of the darkness that hides in plain sight in the forgotten corners of the world. And sometimes, when the wind howls just right, I swear I can hear the faint whisper of the ticket seller's voice, beckoning me back to the long-lost theater, to once again take my seat for the shadow's grasp.